Hello, hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and for taking part in the Lawyer-Linguist information webinar. Why don't you type into the chat box where you're dialing in from and what I wouldn't say what brings you here. That I kind of know. Your definite interest in this career path and the exams, but just say where you're from. Perhaps some of you are already in Luxembourg, where the jobs that this competition leads to will be, but others I see from Brussels, from Croatian in Brussels, Englishman in New York, Italy, Greece, all over the place. Excel, that's a country on its own, part of Brussels. Thank you for sharing that. And we do have Davor from Luxembourg. That is great. So with that, we're going to make sure that the audio and everything works well. I usually don't have any issues with the audio or video feed, and sound seems to be working fine. If anything, then you restart a browser. That's going to solve it, or you take another browser and that should work with the same link. If everything else fails, there is an app on your phone or for your tablet that you can feed in, and then it's going to work. But anyways, everything should be smooth. And you might know some of my work. So I'm co-founder of EU Training and do many other things. I used to be an EU official, and very relevant to this particular competition, I used to be a lawyer linguist in Luxembourg for 3 years. So I have perhaps some additional insights, which I'll be happy to share with you on how the work is or the kind of exams that we had taken at the time. But this time it's slightly different. So we're going to go through the different components and bits and pieces. And if you're interested or want to refresh or go deeper in your EU knowledge, which admittedly is not part of the competition, so you will not have a quiz or exam specifically on EU knowledge, but still, if you'd like to be better acquainted with the institutions, perhaps because your legal studies were in a different field, or you feel that there are some gaps there, there's the Ultimate EU Handbook we just released on the EU's institutions, history, and procedures. And that also exists on the EU Training website as an e-learning course. So this is a book, and then there's the e-learning course. A bit of housekeeping, you will receive the recording and the slides, a participant version of the slides. And certainly questions, I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. But if some are open or I couldn't immediately give you an answer for, we'll find a way to follow up and provide the accurate answer. But again, we as EU Training, we're a private company. We are not EPSO, not the personal selection office. Whatever I say is really to the best of our knowledge and based on our 15 plus years of experience and our careful reading of various official documents, but it's only EPSO and the selection board that can give a final say on something. Often we get questions on eligibility, whether your degree, your work experience, if that is required in light of your degree, does that make you eligible? Is that in line with the requirements of the exam? And those are things where we are very cautious because we can give you some indication, but we can never guarantee an answer there because it's ultimately the official bodies and authorities who can do that. And those of you who may not be familiar with the various resources and communities that we nurture, we have great Facebook communities, not just the general one on the EU Training page and site, also on LinkedIn. We encourage you to follow us, but also subgroups and specific groups for exams. And most notably, I'll show the slide in the end, but you are welcome to join the one dedicated to this particular competition so you can share news and insights and ideas and gossips and everything else related to the exam. And we have a lot of questions, practice questions, webinars, a large number of them free, others are paid, and they really go into a great depth of methodology when it comes to abstract verbal numerical reasoning and various others. Let's get started with the exam. So the AD 424 of 25, obviously that's the year and that's the reference number. So let's do a quick overview of what this is about. Now, you're certainly well familiar with the general descriptive lines and the general bullet points that describe this particular competition, where it is for lawyer linguists for the European Court of Justice based on different language choices and different languages. So these are languages and how many places on the reserve list are earmarked or are planned to be for the time when you pass the competition and you are listed on the reserve list. This could have a certain impact on your choice, probably not a huge impact because the numbers are not so radically different. Perhaps the Italian, you have more places. So if you meet all the requirements that you can choose that tract, that might give you more chances or possibilities, though not necessarily, because it's really the magic is in the proportions, not the absolute numbers. So whether it's 15 or 30, well, you could have 15 places and 300 Danish applicants, but you could have 30 places on Italian and 5,000 applicants. That's a radically different ratio that can inform you about your chances and about your choice. But again, this only applies if you speak many languages and multiple languages almost on comparable levels, and you have the luxury, the liberty to choose one or the other, and you're not kind of immediately determined by one language or another. Because if you're Estonian, you grew up in Estonia, you get your legal degree in Estonia, you that's your mother tongue essentially, well, chances are that's the one that you're going to choose. And also, as we will see in a moment, the degree and the language, they are connected. So you could be a fluent Swedish speaker, but if you obtain your diploma elsewhere, that can be an issue. So the total number of places, 155. And where will you work? Well, Luxembourg, where the European Court of Justice is, and legal translation units. So the lawyer-linguists who deal with judgments and various other legal documents that relate to the work of the court. And well, what are you going to do? You're going to translate complex legal texts for sure, meaning judgments, opinions, pleadings from two source languages. So it's always from a source language into the language that you are most fluent in, which I hesitate to say mother tongue. It's more about mother tongue level. So you are not bound by your mother tongue, because if you grew up in Asia and your mother tongue is a non-European language, well, the term would not be accurate. So we are looking at a language that you are so fluent in, and you're able to write and express yourself with such fluency that it's mother tongue level. And another important thing, especially for those who are new to EU competitions, is that it's not linked to your passport. You can have any citizenship of the EU. You could be Maltese, but the linguistic choices could be totally different. So that the passport is not linked to the linguistic choice, and the linguistic choice is not immediately the same as mother tongue or other. What else would you be doing? Well, review translations. So there's a lot of revision task in that particular job profile. And so certainly legal analysis, which is usually a smaller part of the job. So you're not necessarily a legal advisor or legal counsel. But again, you're sometimes called upon to provide that, because obviously the court works with member state, the member state legal systems and member state legal experts. So occasionally that can be part of the job, where your understanding of a national law plus the linguistic element that is called upon, so you provide a certain professional opinion. General eligibility requirements, as always, you need to be a citizen, you need to have fulfilled your military requirements, and you need to meet the character requirements for the job. These are the core fundamental characteristics or requirements which EPSO always puts in a notice of competition, pretty standard. The specific requirements are the ones where more attention needs to be paid to the details, because languages, it's a bit tricky. It's a bit tricky, as we will see in a couple of slides, of what exactly language combinations are, depending on your profile, depending on the different option, and certainly qualifications and work experience, which is pretty straightforward. And I'm just hesitating for a second whether I should say it now or later, but I'll say it now since it occurred in my mind, to mention that lawyer-linguists, and this particular one is 87 level. So 85 is the starting level, and this is 87. So that is 2 grades up. For those who are less familiar with the EU institutional system, I say to them, that basically takes at least 6 years from an 85 starting level to get to the status, get to the grade of 87. So that's a 6-year time and work experience that is typically required for someone to be placed on an 87. And that has a big impact on your level of responsibility and a big impact, obviously, on your salary. But the lawyer-linguist exam is already marked at 87 without requiring that many years of work experience. So before we get there, this was just more of a teaser, so I can expand on it a bit later. Before we get there, just a couple words what you need to do. Well, first, you can give it a try. There is this tool called Easy, which is aimed at essentially filtering out manifestly ineligible candidates, those who may not have an EU citizenship, those who don't have a legal degree, those who may not have the linguistic skills. There's no testing here. It's more about a Q&A form without any real consequence, but just to be sure that those who really don't meet the criteria are not going to apply and get frustrated, and on the other side to have candidates who are just formally excluded from the competition from the get-go. Let's look at the language rules at first. So the most important thing here, you need to know 3 official languages. And again, they use the term official languages. So the choice is from the 23 EU 24 official EU languages. And you need to know 3 of those, though not necessarily on the same level, but to varying degree. And you see even a British flag there. UK is no longer a member, but English is an official language because it's obviously spoken in Malta, spoken in Ireland. So those are fully fledged official languages and even more working languages on everyday internal correspondence and exchange. So let's see. There are 3 variations, so to say. Variation 1. Okay, so variation 1 is if your language 1 is Czech, Danish, Estonian, Finnish, Latvian, Swedish. So basically native level. And again, you don't need to be a citizen of the country, but you need to be fluent and able enough in that particular language. Then language 2 is French, which has to be satisfactory knowledge. And then there is language 3 with English, German, Italian, Polish, or Spanish. Again, satisfactory knowledge. I tell you my story. Well, it's not a fully fledged story for lack of time and perhaps lack of interest, but just one sentence on my situation at the time, just to demonstrate this point. My French was pretty good at the time when I was hired. It wasn't amazing, but it qualified as satisfactory knowledge, which meant that I was translating from French into Hungarian at a time. And it was primarily French, occasionally English, occasionally Spanish. So I had language 3 as Spanish because English was kind of a given for some reason. That is to say that you can decide to some degree, because if Czech is your main language and you go for this variation, so to say, then you need to meet the other two criteria accordingly. Variation 2 is if you are a completely fluent, native level French, well, not just speaker, but writer. So you need to be able to write in French with enough fluency and accuracy and linguistic diversity to be qualified as native level. One important thing, a question that often comes out, is that you don't need to have any language exam. So there's no DELE or DALFT or whatever, or TOEFL or any of these linguistic exams. None of that is required. That is why that at the competition, at the exam, they test these linguistic abilities and your capabilities. They don't require any outside document of any sort. So going back to variation 2, so French being the main language, because maybe you studied there, maybe you got your legal degree there, you're absolutely fluent and native level in French. Whereas language 2 could be English, Dutch, German, Greek, and all the others you see on screen, plus language 3, which is any of the EU language. So perhaps that could be Latvian, that could be Estonian, that could be Portuguese for that matter. But it has to be different from the other 2. So you need to, again, configure based on your linguistic knowledge whether this fits your particular situation. And then there's option 3, Italian, very similar to the previous one, though here language 2 is only French. So that has to be French, and then language 3 is again somewhat limited to a certain number of languages that they are seeking. And as a backstory, I don't have specific knowledge on it, but I'm kind of second guessing that they being EPSO and their client, which is in this case the court, they carefully analyzed the current staffing numbers in the different linguistic units. They looked at the cases and the languages of those cases as they come in from the different member states, so the caseload and the language and all that. And this is how they configured the competition to match those needs in the end. And you can definitely see already that French is really a primary language, and that's the language of the court. That's the official language of the judgments, and French has a very important role in the court and the EU legal system. So French has an added place, so to say, or higher status, so to say, in the linguistic diversity when it comes to the court. So knowing French is very important in almost all scenarios. Let's go to the qualifications, and that's much more straightforward, where they say, okay, you got to hold a university degree of law from the country corresponding to the language of the competition. And I understand that this could be a little tricky because, say, you take, also French. Could you have obtained a French degree at a university which is accredited in a different country? I can imagine scenarios of that kind. In those cases, I would encourage you to contact the selection board for guidance and say, okay, do I need to do some what is not a validation, the equivalence or some similar administrative step with the Ministry of Education or similar authority, but just to be sure that your language choice and the degree, they correspond to each other. And the level needs to be at a level where you can practice law in that particular country. So that enables you to be a lawyer. And that typically means you need to have a master's degree, because in most cases, having a bachelor degree is insufficient for you to practice law. And for those scenarios, there is an exception or a different scenario where you say no professional experience is required, meaning if you have a master's degree, you need not have any professional experience. But if you have a bachelor degree, then, which is typically 3 years, then you must have at least 1 year relevant legal experience after graduation. So you can see from the particularities of these requirements that they really want to attract including those who are early career professionals or junior professionals, if you will, meaning recent graduates, and in some case, maybe 1 year work experience is required, but not more. Now, on the other side, you are absolutely not excluded, disadvantaged, or any other concern or consideration if you have work experience. If you have 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, no matter, as long as you meet the minimum criteria for the exam itself, this is not going to be an issue. So as long as you meet the criteria, you pass the different components of the test, you're good. You might ask, if you are a mid-career professional, your 40s, perhaps 50s, and you're considering this career path, whether that could work for you. In most cases, yes. There are variables, meaning what's the dare I say, preference in terms of profile, in terms of experience of the head of unit in that particular linguistic department. So there could be some, let's say, more nuanced or more sensitive factors and issues at play at the point of recruitment. This is not at the point of application and going through the competition and getting on the reserve list. We're talking at the point of recruitment, which is separate. So we're talking personal selection, but the recruitment comes after the names on the reserve list have been published. That's a separate part, and EPSO is not responsible for that anymore. They certainly facilitate you finding a specific job, and they can and often do disclose and share the vacancy notices with the successful candidates who are called laureates at that point. And then you can apply for specific vacancies in the linguistic units, and then in most cases be subjected to an interview and then be hired if everything goes well. So qualifications, there are a couple of points there of what's a 1 year professional experience when that scenario applies, and it has to be gained or needs to have been gained after obtaining the law degree, and it was obtained in basically in the areas related to the competition, and that could be legal translation or drafting legal text or similar. And there's a full list in the notice of competition. Depending on your particular circumstances, you can check whether that's compliant, that meets the criteria or not. I'll pause it for a second, encourage you to put questions into the chat box. I'm more than happy to answer them to the degree I can. I do see from the corner of my eyes some typing happening there, but I don't seem to have any questions incoming yet. But I'll pause for 1 second, get a sip of water, and see if you would like me to elaborate on something. All right, while you are typing, and if questions are coming in, I'll definitely answer them. But okay, here's one. What's the probable date for the test? I'll take my crystal ball and let you know. But one interesting or perhaps helpful indication there, as we will look at the dates, is you need to send in your documents by early October. So it's perhaps an indication of when the tests are likely going to be. Very likely not going to happen before the summer. Very likely not going to happen before the summer break. I would say much more likely, and I say that cautiously because I don't have official information, but I would say it's more likely than not that they're going to take place sometime in September-ish. But again, take it with a pinch of salt. Possibly, maybe early July, right? So there are some moving parts there, and there were more than some issues with the translator test, which is actually going to be repeated very soon. So those fiascos certainly have a certain impact on the running of this particular competition, because they want to avoid any technical hiccups. A few words on why this is a great thing, but then we look at the specific components of the exam. I see some of you are asking about that. So there are great benefits. There's health insurance, there's European schools, there are attractive salaries. We have a salary calculator on our website, which is modeled on the official salary calculation, with a disclaimer that it's not 100% exactly the same. But again, it gives you a broad idea of how much you could likely earn. So it's 87 level, let's say salary step 2, because you have some years of work experience, and eligible for household allowance because of being married or in partnership and or having kids. And that gives a pretty attractive salary of 8,400 euros, which, of course, in Luxembourg is not the same price level as some other parts of Europe, but we are going to look at this as a very positive thing, because the salary is an attractive one nevertheless. All right, so let's look at the competition phases, and I see some questions have come in, so perhaps I answer one of them before we go any further. So will the reserve list be locked for the court? Will other institutions be allowed to recruit from this? So based on the approach and everything of this competition, it's basically for the court, which means that other institutions are not going to hire, at least for a good while. And the good while, usually a year, perhaps more. Legally speaking, they could hire from the list, but there's a pretty good reason why the whole competition is kind of custom made and tailored for the court. So again, if you have an ambition to be on the reserve list and then be hired by the commission or others, probably not going to happen. One thing you might consider at some point, and that was to some degree my career, where I started at the court, and after a certain number of years, you can go to another institution. But typically, they want to keep lawyer linguists in the job for 3 years before they let them go to other institutions, if that's what their heart desires. Okay, and is there a special tax on the salary? So the salary calculator figure, the 8,400 is what you get net in your pocket monthly, roughly. There are some taxes, but they are pretty minimal, which is often subject to a lot of criticism. But again, that's a different matter. But there are some minimal taxes here and there. But depending on those variables, those are broadly the numbers. And I see that Letizia asking, if you're recruited, do you have to work in Luxembourg every day or allowed to do smart working or remote working? Honestly, I don't know the most recent policy on that. I think that you need to be near Luxembourg, not necessarily in Luxembourg, and spend. Again, I say that with a big caveat, possibly about 3 days a week in the place. Okay, here's somebody Tilda is helping with. Allowed to work 10 days from another country. Yeah, that's a somewhat separate thing from the weekly regular work. So it's not about you going to a sunny Greek island and working there all the time or from there, but there could be some flexibility in remote working. Again, not on a consistent regular basis or for extended period of time, but maybe some days a week. There is some opportunity there. Okay, so in terms of competition phases, what are the different steps that you need to go through? It's not very complicated. I think it's a pretty straightforward, streamlined system where you need to sign up, create an account, and do a proper EPSO candidate profile, unless you already have one, because in that case, you can use it. And number two is EPSO test. So the test that we're going to be looking at in a second. And they, meaning the selection board, are going to conduct an eligibility check. So they will check your degrees, your diplomas, making sure that, making sure that it fully complies with the requirements, that you meet those. And I see, again, some personal situations being shared there, or asking whether that would qualify. We'll try to look at some of those. And then there's a reserve list. So it's essentially point number two, which is the most consequential, the most, dare I say, important part of the process. When you apply, again, very straightforward. You create an account. I don't think anyone needs to be really conducted or guided through that particular process. But one element which might make you wonder is which language should you submit your application in. And it's not a huge deal. You might choose the main language of the competition that you've chosen. And if you have your eyes set on the Latvian team or the Swedish team or any other language that the competition is run in, then you might want to fill in the profile in that particular language, because the person hiring you in the very end is probably going to be looking at your profile in that particular language. But you could do it in English, and you could do it in any of the official languages. Now, one important thing is that supporting documents that can be uploaded later. So the deadline to apply is the 25th of May. So roughly, well, not just roughly, exactly 1 month from today's date of the recording. And uploading the document is only early October. So like I said, that may have a certain indication as to the test, but not necessarily, because by the time you need to upload the documents, perhaps the test will have been conducted fully. So it could be if it's in September or if it's in July. August, there are not going to be tests. So August is really a holiday season all over Europe, but definitely in EU circles and Brussels and Luxembourg. So no test then. So either before or somewhat closely after. And they cannot make a decision until and unless you have uploaded the documents, and that's in October. So even if the exams will have been run earlier, the decision on who gets on the reserve list can only be made after the reserve list or the eligibility check has been done. So let's look at the test. What sort of tests do you need to go through? So everyone who properly applies, fills out whatever needs to be filled out, will be invited to take the test. So it's not that they do a pre-selection. It's not that they do any pre-check. No, you will be invited. And the tests are always conducted remotely. So you need to have a computer, internet connection, hopefully silence, no barking dogs. Well, you might have barking dogs, but make sure that you sit in a calm environment. And it's on a computer where you need to have access to administrator rights because you need to install the software. I say that with a tiny bit of caution because now EPSO is in the process of finding a new provider and we need to see what sort of system they come up with. But chances are it will still require you to install a software on the computer. So you need to have that level of access in the computer if it's a work computer, because that helps preventing any fraud, any cheating, blocks different applications, and can kind of observe through the camera your environment, making sure nobody's helping you. And then if you fail to complete any test, then you're disqualified. I mean, that's pretty straightforward. So here's the essence of what kind of tests you need to pass. One part are the reasoning skills, and that's probably no big news to anyone who've been following EPSO competitions or have done some competitions, which is the abstract verbal numerical reasoning. Number 2, translation test. Number 3, translation review. I see that somebody spotted a typo. I think we are picking fight with the wrong crowd because all of you are eagle-eyed reviewers and legal and linguistic experts. So probably we should have just outsourced it and say, okay, spot anything there. But no worries. Thank you for flagging that. And going back to the tests, there's verbal reasoning, numerical reasoning, abstract reasoning. The good news is, and that's an important element, is it's on a pass-fail basis. The scores do not count to the final score. And I don't want to minimize it, but I'm saying you only need to pass at a certain pass rate, but you don't need to be among the best performing or the best candidates. And that means verbal reasoning, you have 20 questions and 35 minutes. There's a text passage, question, statements, 1 correct answer. Numerical reasoning, 10 questions and 20 minutes. So again, with data interpretation, calculation, estimation, it's not that easy, but again, it's not extremely hard if you consider the fact that you don't need to be among the best performing candidates. All you need to do is pass. And abstract reasoning, moving shapes and figures and everything else. And the combined pass mark is what you need to reach. So 20 out of 40, which means that if you totally fail or you're not very good in abstract reasoning, you can still pass. So you can still get the 50% and get to the next stage. Now, importantly, you do get to the next stage on the date of the exam, at the time of sitting the exam. It's not that they do an immediate analysis and say, oh, you haven't made it, goodbye. No, you are going to take each and every component. So the abstract verbal numerical reasoning and the true translation tests, where the score calculation happens afterwards. And there's a good reason for that, because if it turns out that one question for any reason did not meet the quality standards, then they can still do certain recalculations without getting into trouble for those who may have been eliminated earlier had they chosen that route where they just don't even continue with the subsequent test on the date of the exam. So you do everything on a single day. There are obviously pauses and toilet breaks, and you can get a coffee and something in between the different components. Usually the abstract verbal reasoning can happen in a single sitting. So each has the time allocated and no breaks in between. Then the other part comes, but in between there is a break. And again, the last part, there is a break. So pass, fail. And comes the next one, which is obviously very related, very relevant for the kind of job that you will be expected to do, which is a translation test. And the most important thing, no dictionary allowed, no other tool or resource is allowed. You have 90 minutes and you need to translate a legal text in language, from language 2, in language 2 into language 1. So it's always towards language 1, which is mother tongue level. Hence my own example. At the time, it was always towards my Hungarian from a source language. So the source language is language 2. And then there's a pass mark, 40 out of 80. And again, this is done on a computer. This is not handwritten or anything like that. So make sure that you're comfortable with keyboards and diacritics and everything that goes with it, that you can type properly the translation of that particular test. And here comes the last one, which is a translation review. So again, no other external, or dare I say internal or software powered dictionary or other is allowed. And you have 90 minutes. An interesting thing. So you need to review a legal text, which was machine translated. So machine translated from language 3, and you need to review it in your language 1. So you have this machine translated something, which is probably kind of okay, but you need to review it and highlight the discrepancies or inconsistencies or wrong choice of terminology and those kind of things. 40 points out of 80. Voila. So that's pretty much the crux of it when it comes to eligibility checks and all the rest. So just to sum it up, reasoning test, eligibility check. Again, this mostly happens on the back end. So this is not, there are no delays in between these. It's just to understand that once you've submitted the tests, this is what happens on the back end. So they will check the reasoning test, see if you're eligible. If that is verified, then they score your translation test, and those who test, they will actually have their review test scored. And then in the end, they will say, okay, how many points do you have out of the maximum total of 160? And that's when they do a ranking where they determine the best, well, the highest score of 15, 20, 30, depending on how many places of the reserve list have been planned. Well, that many candidates will be placed on a reserve list based on the scoring. And again, the abstract verbal numerical is not part of that ranking. Okay. Eligibility check, just a word on that. Not everyone's degrees, diplomas, everything will be checked, like we said, because it depends on your scores, but you still need to send in everything. You still need to go through all of that and making sure that whatever you declare, well, your documents corroborate it, that your documents support all those claims. Well, probably not many claims, but the claims, whether you studied the right thing, is that actually relevant for the requirements, and your degree has been issued by an official accredited university, and all those other things. Reserve list, like you say, or like you see, all pass marks, highest scores deemed eligible, and then until the number of places filled, where, like I said, 15, 20 or more. And it's not a ranked list. So it's not that those with the highest score are going to be hired first, but anyone who is on the reserve list are eligible to be hired, and in this case, by the court, to carry out those specific job tasks. And then you get a notification, you open your champagne or kombucha or whatever rocks your boat, and you are starting to plan how you're going to actually get a job once you are on the reserve list. But again, the recruitment services are notified, and some are in dire need to hire new staff because they might have staff shortages, especially for smaller languages, or in some cases, countries where, let's say, the purchasing power is very high, so fewer people are attracted to do this kind of job or for this kind of salary. So there are a great number of variables there. But again, the recruitment can happen fairly quickly. So before I get to this bit, how to get the job, I see Letizia. Did I answer it? If you're, yeah, okay. We spoke about the smart working, and Jada, if I pronounce your name correctly, you just mentioned that at the moment of recruitment, EPSO is not responsible anymore. However, based on your personal experience, how would you say that being shortlisted along experienced professional while being a fresh graduate could lower the chances of being selected? Yeah, I would say maybe to some degree those dynamics come into play, where maybe you had some extra curricular activities. Maybe, I mean, for me at the time, I had a full-time job, but I was doing some moonlighting, some side job of doing legal translation. So the fact that I worked with a translation agency, and I could demonstrate that I had a policy kind of job as a civil servant back in my home country, but I also was working as a freelancer to do translations. And certainly that's an additional thing to say, hey, I'm not totally new to the thing. I have been doing this kind of work, and that could be an asset. So simply saying somebody has a certain kind of experience may or may not play in their advantage. And it's rather, if you're really serious about it, maybe that's a kind of activity or work experience is something you could do, or something you could already envisage applying for or dealing with. How to get the job? Well, practice a lot, and whether it's 10, 12 weeks, maybe less, maybe more, there are many variables there. If you haven't dealt with mathematics since you left high school, then maybe you want to brush up on that. Again, a lot of personal and individual variables, but take it seriously and dedicate enough time to be sure that you are up to speed when it comes to all these exam components. And practice regularly, whether it's, well, 1 hour a day, maybe that's too ambitious, but still you could do it quite often. And it's a bit like gym or learning a new language or a musical instrument. Do it regularly, be disciplined about the regularity of it, so you train those mental muscles to be ready for the exam day. We actually have a preparation planner tool on the EU training website. You can look it up. It's a free tool. You can input certain variables, and it gives you a preparation plan. Somewhat basic, but again, it's a good indication to say, how am I going to allocate my time? And summer holidays are coming at some point, though it doesn't look like it in the current Belgian weather. But one day summer will come, and there might be a big pause if the exams do not happen until then. If they do happen until then, of course, that's a different setup. But again, have a plan and be consistent about it, and learn the methodology, especially for abstract verbal numerical reasoning, but just as much translation. You know as well as anyone in the business that this is not just taking some words and translating those words. It's the meaning, it's the legal side of it, the actual deeper layers of the language that you need to do, and do it without dictionary in time. So that is a challenging task that you are encouraged to practice. So also stay persistent, making sure that you don't give up, and then do simulations, translation simulations, abstract verbal numerical simulations, whichever you feel that you have a gap that you still need to do. And then we have lots of webinars, lots of resources you might want to check out. Many of them are free methodology, others are paid. So pro webinars, check those out on the website, depending on which one you feel is your weakness. Lots of reasoning skill tests, simulations, and workshops. So if you feel that you want to join a group training or an online workshop, we're more than happy to help. We have excellent qualified trainers who are available to do that. And we have lots of other free resources. So we publish news and updates and EU jobs. You can all find that either on our social media and or on our website. And we also do Ask Me Anything sessions. I think we forgot to update that date. We had one quite recently, but we're doing another one in May. So in a couple of weeks. It's on the 15th of May. So thank you for mentioning that. So 15th of May, it's literally what it says. It's Ask Me Anything related to EPSO exam. But if you want something more urgent, pressing, we are welcome to send a message through the customer support, and we'll do our best to answer it. And then there is the EU test book. By the way, the new edition is coming out. We're still looking at when, but in a few weeks, hopefully in a few weeks. And that's somewhat updated, not radically, but certain things have been improved. And there's the EU career development book, which you might want to look at. And the community I had mentioned at the beginning, a Facebook group where you can join fellow candidates and share information. And then the offer with a 15% off of our digital products that we will send to you in an email. And it's valid for a limited number of days, limited amount of time. But hopefully that can contribute to your preparation. So I'm looking at the incoming questions, comments, and still encouraging you to ask questions. I can see how to train specifically for the translation exam. One pretty good way could be you find a fellow candidate or friend or whoever also prepares for these exams, and you can cross-check each other. You can provide or come up with assignments for each other. You could take an EU press release. You could take, I wouldn't take a full judgment. Those are pretty long. But you can definitely do that kind of exercise where you provide a challenge to the other. You create realistic simulation environment in the sense that 90 minutes on a computer, turn off all the apps, not to use any dictionaries, be that software or physical, and you do it. And then you swap it and you say, okay, let's critically evaluate each other's. You could do the same text, or you could do different. And another point, I forgot to mention it, but that could be an important thing to highlight, which is there's no EU knowledge multiple choice test. So your EU knowledge, how much and what you know about the EU as such, is not tested directly. There's no direct question on, I don't know, how many judges are in the grand chamber in the court. You're not going to have a question of that kind, because those kind of tests are not part of the competition, which is an interesting thing to highlight, because another linguistic competition did have such a test. Anything else? Anything else that I can answer for you? You can pay to get better results, really? I'm not sure about the context of that comment. Any other question that I can be helpful with or answer for you? And like I said, this is relevant as much for those who are here right now. But if you have a question in the next weeks or months, you're welcome to send it through the customer support. We'll be more than happy to help you out. And if we can't help you out, which can definitely happen, we'll let you know as well. Okay, will you have revision tests on the website? I leave that to the team to answer. I think we will. I'm pretty sure we will. I don't know when or how, but they can update you on that, or we can update you about that in the follow-up email. Okay, verbal reasoning test in language 1. Yes, the abstract verbal numerical reasoning is in language 1. And that also means that language 1 is the one in which you can process all the information very quickly and well. Voila. Okay, let's see. Do you know when we'll know about the test dates? So the deadline, 25th of May. My guess would be by late June, you should be able to plan. So you will likely know when the tests are. Again, with some caveats, because there are quite a few moving parts given the software, given some other factors. But I'm expecting information on the actual date of the exam by that time. So a couple of weeks after the closing date of applications. Good. So with that, I think we will end here. And a big thanks to the team, to Elmi, to Rita, to India, to everyone who helped make this happen. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the team's effort. And I hope this was informative and helpful for your preparation, for your planning, for everything that is related to the exam. One takeaway is take it seriously. So if you set your mind on pursuing this career, then take seriously each step and component and part. Look at the degrees, the languages, the practice, and all the rest, so that it can help your preparation and you can succeed. So hopefully you'll have a successful career in Luxembourg in the end. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. To be continued, and wishing you good luck for the exam.